Defensive neorealism is a structural theory derived from the school of realism in international relations theory. It finds its foundation in Kenneth Waltz's theory of international politics, in which Waltz argues that the anarchical structure of the international system encourages states to maintain moderate and reserved policies to attain security. In contrast, offensive realism assumes that states seek to maximize their power and influence to achieve security through domination and hegemony. Defensive neorealism asserts that aggressive expansion as promoted by offensive neorealists upsets the tendency of states to conform to the balance of power theory, thereby decreasing the primary objective of the state, which they argue is ensuring its security. While defensive realism does not deny the reality of interstate conflict, nor that incentives for state expansion do exist, it contends that these incentives are sporadic rather than endemic. Defensive neorealism points towards structural modifiers, such as the security dilemma and geography, and elite beliefs and perceptions to explain the outbreak of conflict. Theoretical origins. Defensive neorealism is a structural theory that is part of structural realism, also known as neorealism, which is a subset of the realist school of thought in international relations theory. Neorealism therefore works from realism's five base theoretical assumptions as outlined by offensive neorealist scholar John J. Mearsheimer in The False Promise of International Institutions. These assumptions are: the international system is anarchic. States inherently possess some offensive military capability, which gives them the ability to hurt and possibly destroy each other. States can never be certain about the intentions of other states. The basic motive driving states is survival. States think strategically about how to survive in the international system. These five assumptions drive neorealism's belief that state survival is attained through self-help. However, neorealism departs from classical realism's other main assumption that it is the flaws and complexities of human nature that drive the international system. Instead, neorealists assert that the anarchy inherent to the structure of the international system is the driving force of international politics. It is on these key neorealist assumptions that defensive and offensive neorealists base their competing understandings of state behavioral patterns. Main tenets. As Kenneth Waltz asserted in his seminal defensive neorealist text Theory of International Politics, defensive realists argue that the anarchic nature of the international system encourages states to undertake defensive and moderate policies. They argue that states are not intrinsically aggressive and that the first concern of states is not to maximize power but to maintain their position in the system. This is the crucial point of departure from offensive realism, which instead argues that anarchy encourages states to pursue aggressive territorial expansion to ensure security through increased state power, as the world is condemned to perpetual great power competition. Defensive realists identify a number of problems regarding offensive realism's support of aggressive state expansion, building on Waltz's balance of power theory and the assumption that balancing is more common than bandwagoning. Defensive realists assert that states which strive to attain hegemony in the international system will be counterbalanced by other states seeking to maintain the status quo, while offensive realists believe states inherently desire hegemony. Defensive realists argue that states are socialized and aware of historical precedent, which defensive realists assert generally displays state aggression and expansion to fulfill the aim of hegemony as attracting resistance from other states. Aggression is therefore argued to be self-defeating in achieving the aim of security, which defensive realists posit to be the state's primary objective. Indeed, Jack Snyder asserts, international anarchy punishes aggression. It does not reward it. This assumption, in turn, informs defensive realism's assertion that the benefits of conquest rarely outweigh its negatives. Defensive realists state that the problems conquest faces are diverse, existing both during the opening phases of expansion and during occupation. They contend that the subjugation of a state's population is risky and difficult, especially in the face of the modern concept of nationalism, which can provide an effective narrative of resistance if the state is conquered. This increases the already expensive process of occupation, especially in societies that rely on freedom of movement and transportation for economic prosperity, because these are vulnerable to sabotage and embargo.